Hello everyone. Today we are going to look at how to create basic objects in Blender. Blender is a free software which you can download from blender.com, and it's a very powerful tool. So if you want to learn 3D and you don't have access to 3ds Max or Maya or Cinema 4D, Blender is a very good option to get started and learn the basics of 3D. So today we are going to look at the basics of how to get started in Blender, understand the interface, create some basic geometry, add colors to the geometry, and make an object that resembles like this car. I also created a similar tutorial in 3ds Max, so check it out if you want to learn how to use 3ds Max basics and create a similar object like this. So let us get started. We'll go to File, New, reload, start a file. So this is what you will get when you start Blender for the first time. There are some elements which are not necessary, so you can delete them. So to select anything in Blender, you have to right click. For example, if you want to select the cube here, you right click on it, and then you can hit the delete key on the keyboard to delete it. There is some object here which can be deleted as well. Now you see, when you just click anywhere in the viewport, you get a circle. Okay, so we will understand why it comes and what that is later on. So right now what you see here, this is called a viewport, and it says it's a perspective viewport. To create any to learn any 3D program, it is best to use a 3-button mouse, because you will be needing all the 3 buttons to navigate through the scene. So what I'm doing here is I'm scrolling my middle mouse button up and down to zoom in. To further demonstrate, let us create something. So if you go to the Create tab on the left side here, you can click on the cube, and you can see that whenever I click on my viewport, and then when you click an object, that object is created at that point. So you can specify where you want to create that object, and then place that object in that place. Okay, so you can see that you can create a cube. And then when you scroll your mouse, you're zooming in and out. If you click the mouse and drag around, you can look at your objects from different angles. Okay, so you're looking at your objects through a camera. There's a camera, and what you're doing is you're zooming into the camera, and you're moving the camera around. Now if you hit the shift key, then you can pan things around, so you can get more space to work on. So there's zoom, there's rotate, and then there is pan. Okay, delete key on the keyboard will delete the objects, or if you go to tool, then there's transform, rotate, scale, mirror, duplicate, duplicate linked, and then delete button. So you can select an object. To select an object, because the left click is to select where your object is getting created, the right click is to select an object. Okay, so remember that you have to right click to select an object. And then if you want to select 2 objects at a time, then you will have to use the shift key to select the 2 objects. Okay, and the other option is to go to select and border select. So you need to learn these keyboard shortcuts. Border select is a B key. So if you hit for example, I'll select one object, and then instead I will go to the B key, and then I'll select these 2 objects, and now I can move those 2 objects at the same time. Okay, so pan, let me create the cube again. Alright, so I'll undo it by using Ctrl Z and create it in the center. Okay, now if you look at down here, there is a move tool, so you can move the cube. Then there's a rotate tool, so you can rotate it in the 3 axes, okay, X, Y, and Z, or you can rotate along the view. This is a very dangerous tool. I would encourage you to not use it, always click on the specific axis of rotation, or for that matter transformation. So if you want to move it X, Y or Z, it is better to click on those arrows. And then the third one is scale. Before we go into that, let us for example look at how to make these transformations back to 0. So if you drag here, there is your object information, and here if you type 0, 0 and 0, now you're back to your default transformation. Move it about the grid here. Alright, and then if you click on the scale tool, now you can scale the object, and you can see how the scale option here moves. So you have to click on these options. So you got to understand what these different options are, but don't get overwhelmed with all the options that are there. As you go through these tutorials, slowly you will understand all these options, and the main aim is to create small projects, so that is you feel rewarded that you have achieved something, and in the process you will learn the interface and how all the options work. If you just focus on understanding what the options do and not create something, then you may get overwhelmed, and it's better to create and then learn as you create. Okay, so the next thing we are going to look at here, you can see that there are different options. So if you want to see the wireframe mode, you can look at the wireframe of the object, and if you want to look at the solid, then you can check out the other options, how the texture looks. Again, don't really worry about what these options are. The render view, we deleted the lights in the scene, so there's no color to that. So the two important things here are wireframe and solid right now to begin with. All right, so let us just understand those things. The other important thing is to if you go to view, you can look at the top view. Okay, and you can see how it says top perspective. You can go into ortho mode, or you can be in the perspective mode. Okay, you can go to the right view, and you can see now the right is right perspective, so the object is looking in perspective. And if you go to let's go to again front, you only see the four sides, but if you are in perspective and then go to front, then you will see the perspective view of the object. Okay, if you go all the way on top, so when you go to click on view, you can go up, and there is an arrow here, so you can see you can go further up. There are more tools, and you can go to quad view. So quad view will show all the four views, and again shift and middle mouse button is pan, zoom in and out is the scroll middle mouse button. Okay, and then you can go back to your toggle ortho off, and then you can go into the user perspective, or you might be in user ortho. So user ortho is a very distorted view, so better to stay in user perspective, which is the default. Okay, so if some things mess up while you're working on it and you don't know what has happened, you can always go to file, load factory settings. I'll do it again, load factory settings, and then you just have to accept it. Okay, so here if once you go back to the factory settings, you get your lights and the cameras back. So if you go into the render mode, then you see the rendered version of your cube. Alright, so it'll go back to solid. So once we create an object, if you come here, we have looked at how to change the location. So you can click and drag here to change the location. This is to be precise. So if you want to be precisely at a specific space, you can simply click on it and mention the distance, or you can simply move it around, and then that will also update here. You can click and drag to change the scale, or you can drag and rotate. Now what I did is here, this is important to understand. If I click and drag and then if I release, it is accepted. I will undo it. But if you click and drag, and if you don't want this to accept, you can just right click when you are clicked. So instead of releasing the click, right click, and then it will go back to the 0, whatever it was. So click and then right click, it will go back, or move, right click and it goes back, or scale, right click and move, goes back. Okay. The other thing we are going to look at is materials. So if you click on this button here, these are that is the material for your object, and then this is the color of that material. So if you select some color, then the material will change. We are only going to look at the color right now, so don't worry about anything else. We want the diffuse color, which is actually the color of the object. Okay, there are many other options in materials. We are only worried about modeling right now. There are various aspects to creating a project. One is modeling, the second one is texture mapping, the third one is adding cameras and composing your scene, and then the last one is adding lights and then rendering the scene. And then you have to go back and forth to between these to work on your project. So in this project, we are only going to learn how to model. We are only going to create an object. We are not going to look at composition or materials or rendering. We will just understand the interface and create the basic object. So these are the basic things you need to know to create your first object, which was the car. One more thing that I want to cover that is going to be necessary for creating the object is if you go to this modify tab, we can add a modifier, and only modifier we're going to use is wireframe. So if you click on the wireframe mode, it is going to create a new geometry, and we're going to use this for the rims of our car. So with this basic information,